When we talk to a client, if we were to say to them, well, we're the best real estate advisor in the world, we negotiate the best deals, we really care about our clients, we get you the best deals, well, everyone is going to say exactly those things. So we spend a lot of time really trying to understand what our clients' pain points are, what their frustrations are. And there's no amount of marketing material, which is still part of that process of courting a client, that can ever really understand what keeps a client up at night and how you can specifically talk to that issue.
My name's Mike Lander, and you're listening to Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast, where we bring you actionable insights about sales RFPs, negotiations, and difficult procurement discussions from sales leaders, brand leaders, and procurement leaders. Please subscribe to get updates when new episodes are released. Robert, thanks ever so much for joining us on Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really looking forward to it. We had our pre-recording call. We met at a Helm lunch, didn't we? About, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago.
Yes, we did.
So before we get into the conversation itself, do you want to just tell listeners who you are, what do you do?
Sure. So my name's Robert Leigh. I am founder of a firm called DeVono. We are the largest and leading London occupier-only corporate real estate services firm. So what that really means is we advise occupiers on all things related to office space in London and throughout the UK.
Okay, very good. And to just completely unprepared, but what's that kind of space like at the moment? Because obviously everyone thinks about the housing market and the commercial market. And
yeah, I think the reality and just sort of focusing on London, because that's where we spend the majority of our time. It's not necessarily what you hear in the headlines.
Exactly.
The number one priority of so many of our clients is how do we get the workforce back to the office with more regularity,
right.
And doing that in a really authentic way, which is providing kind of best in class office space so that actually, people feel the gravitational pull of wanting to be in the office.
Yes.
A lot of what we now talk about is activity-based working, which is where is the best place to do a certain piece of work. And obviously that's what business owners are working really hard for, is so that people have different types of spaces, interesting spaces where they can do different types of job. That ordinarily the home wouldn't be the best suited place to do it. So a lot of collaboration, a lot of idea sharing, lots of things around culture. So the office is really a different place as it was to before kind of the pandemic, and it certainly serves a different purpose. So a lot of what we do is spend time with clients kind of understanding their purpose for the office, which is a very different answer to what it was historically.
No, absolutely. And obviously, as you know, I talk to an awful lot of entrepreneurs, founder-led businesses at all sorts of different scales. And they're all facing very similar challenges. Is how do we authentically get people together for culture, for social activity, for bonding, but also for learning? How do we help younger people that are joining the organization that are less experienced learn from more experienced senior people? Because it's very hard over Zoom.
I absolutely agree. I mean, look, I think about my own kind of professional journey, and I think about if this ever happened to me midway through my career, how that would have changed my trajectory. And one of the biggest things that has kind of supported and nurtured me, through my professional career is having a sense of belonging, having colleagues, having peers to learn from, to bounce ideas from. And, if there was, a 3-year gap of where, frankly, that was taken back, and as we transition, I just reflect on how that would have changed my kind of trajectory.
Absolutely.
And this is why, it's been a really difficult kind of process for so many people still in that, learning phase as to how that's affected them. So that's, a really important point that so many businesses are focusing on, is that kind of sharing knowledge.
Exactly. And that brings us kind of nicely into the kind of the topic we're going to talk about, because I call it commercial mindset. How does anyone learn to have a sharp commercial mindset? Typically from other people around you that are very commercial, very good commercial leaders. I mean, I can think of half a dozen people that I've learned that from. But that relies upon being around them and seeing how they operate and listening to them on the phone and understanding how they structure deals and how they negotiate deals. That's really hard to do virtually, I think.
Yes, I mean, we're a 5 day a week firm,
right?
And we are, because we sell offices. That's what we do. So in part, it's just a consequence of the product that we're selling. But also, actually, we feel that the best place for our teams to be is the office, and a lot of it is just the noise, the energy that comes from all being together. That's huge, absolutely huge. And, we hear from everyone the moment they come into the office. It's uplifting.
Right.
Certainly when it comes to sales and business development, I don't know how you would, it would be really hard to motivate yourself if you're in a room on your own and not having the energy and buzz of feeding off other people.
Absolutely.
And it's so important that everyone is together, even so far as historically we used to have salespeople get on a call and then go and walk into a quiet section, because they didn't want to be overheard. And frankly, we kind of stopped that, because there is so much you can learn in coaching people on calls, listening to calls, but also it lifts and motivates the next person to get on the phone and do exactly the same. So exactly. It's infectious.
Yeah. So let's get into the kind of detail of the question. So we've kind of agreed one big topic this time, which is, how do you build a successful business development function that drives sales growth? So let's kind of kick off with a myth or a reality. There's a big myth around, I think, that cold calling's dead. No one answers the phone anymore. So what's your kind of view on that?
I think anyone that thinks that, frankly, doesn't know what they're talking about or don't know how to do it.
Right.
I think that there is a place for kind of cold calling, and it's part of a blended strategy.
Yep.
There needs to be many, many touch points when it comes to a sales process. But I think in a world where no one is in short supply of a supplier in any one particular discipline, so normally a customer will probably just go to the lowest hanging fruit, which is, a firm they've heard of or that a peer has heard of. And normally people who are outside of that very immediate sphere are disregarded.
Right.
So cold calling plays a role, which is to make life easier for the customer. Whereas to get them on the phone and kind of understand what their requirements kind of are and build a relationship with them in that way, in which a door would normally be kind of closed. What a customer doesn't normally do is, well, I have a requirement and I'm going to, shop around and call several different places. It doesn't necessarily work like that. There will just be an immediate short list of, 1 or 3 firms that they'll reach out.
Yeah.
And cold calling plays a role in knocking down those barriers. Timing is huge.
Yeah.
Timing is a huge part of it. And frankly, if you can, over a period of time, establish a connection and understand their buying habits and the timing of their buying habits, sometimes the best timed call is frankly all the selling you need to do.
Right. And how does a good kind of like initial call work? I don't mean the script. We don't need a script, but just in theory, I think a lot of people struggle. I mean, I've struggled in the past with, if you don't know someone, but you've got their number and they don't know who you are and you want to raise awareness, just even the act of picking up the phone can be quite scary.
Yeah.
So how do you train? Because I know you've got a number of people that do that.
Yeah.
How do you go through the training with them to reduce the kind of mental anxiety?
Yes. I think that it's a process, but it's I suppose, understanding the purpose of the call. It's always approaching a call with, we want to provide value to a client on any sales call. So even the first call you need to be making is one where the client will have a sense of value. And so at the moment that a client thinks that you're just calling with no value is when you get shut out. So it's just always explaining to a telesales or a cold caller that, we're trying to build value on every call. We're trying to be valuable to the client. And I think that gives people more permission to ask questions. So ahead of every call, you need to have some type of insights or some type of kind of document which you think would be helpful to your potential customer, and talk about how sharing these insights may help them better understand the process or better understand the solutions that exist.
Right.
And I think that so it's important that you have that artillery behind you, so that you have something to offer, and having something to offer, frankly, gives you, I suppose, a permission from the client to talk a little bit further about how these may be supportive to them. I suppose with all of a sales call is not just a one-hit wonder.
No, absolutely.
A sales call probably will involve anywhere between 3 and 8 calls to arrive at that, yes, let's meet. And the biggest thing that any telesalesperson needs to understand is, when is that person going to be buying, or certainly in the market to buy? And we spend a lot of time establishing that. So we're in real estate. So the thing that we track is people's lease events or license expiries. And once we understand that, we can understand at which point a client would be considering their real estate strategy, in which case we will be talking to them leading up to that point. And also throughout the journey, kind of understanding when they are, how are they going to be going to market? Are they going to be kind of tendering? What's their procurement process? And if you start to, understand these things, you can start to build a story and build a narrative. And if you're in IT, it will be how long is your contract agreement? If it's in property rentals, it's when does your kind of, when does your letting expire? So that you know to call them at a time that's going to be most helpful to them. And so that is, so over the journey of a sales cycle, it's adding value in on every phone call, but it's building that story as to when they will arrive at making a decision. And like I said,
do you build a database of how? So I guess people are also thinking, they're listening, well, how do I know when they're about to want to change office, for example? So you need obviously to know when their lease expires. So do you keep a database of all of the properties in London and when they expire?
Yes. Look, there are various tools and databases, and I'm sure in anyone's particular sector there will be some type of insights. But the reality is if the client perceives there to be some value at the right time, asked in the right way, they'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
So this information is obtainable as long as the buyer believes that there is something of value to sharing that information with you. So
it's an exchange, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if you've said something that piques their interest and it's something that sounds interesting, then you need to follow through and understand when it will be most valuable to talk about it. If you don't build that trust, or there is nothing of particular interest or value that you've had on the call, when you ask to, for a time to call back, frankly, they won't tell you that.
Exactly.
Because and they won't think that to be a particular value.
So that thing of value on that first call, because we're thinking about, the first time someone picks up the phone, to stop them from just like putting the phone down, typically in your industry, what is that kind of piece of value that you can give to someone where they will give you basically a bit more time? Yeah. What are they looking for? What are they interested in?
I suppose that when you're considering a real estate strategy or any strategy, what are the things that you'll want to know? So from us, we have our own dedicated insights team. So we have information on what the market's doing, where rental trends have been over the last 5 years, what we're seeing from other clients and their workplace strategies. Various interviews from really interesting people within the marketplace who have an opinion on where we perceive the trajectory to be. All these things about business leaders and their objectives, and we often do sector insights as well. So depending on what sector you're in, we'll do kind of deeper dives into those particular sectors. So where peers are in the marketplace, what they're doing. So it's these insights that we feed into, that we provide, so that when people are considering their strategy, is we have some insights that we can share with them that can inform them. Now, I appreciate there's going to be lots of listeners who don't have the, that don't have the bandwidth or, or capabilities to provide such inserts, but there will be simple documents that they can provide that would provide useful insights or give people food for thought leading up to a decision or leading up to a time and place when someone will be reviewing their strategy. But going back to, is telesales dead? Like, the answer is absolutely not. And the focus of so many of our conversations is I was reading an article the other day and it was interesting approach by Nike, which is they don't sell on features because everything is the same. When we talk to a client, if we were to say to them, well, we're the best real estate advisor in the world, we negotiate the best deals, we really care about our clients, we get you the best deals, well, everyone is going to say exactly those things. So we spend a lot of time really trying to understand what our clients' pain points are, what their frustrations are, and story tell as to how we've supported other clients in exactly that same position. And there's no amount of marketing material, which is still part of that process of courting a client, that can ever really understand what keeps a client up at night and how you can specifically talk to that issue. Yeah. And frankly, there's only a conversation can extract those types of insights that will enable us to absolutely zero in on what is most important to a client.
And as you say, that's also about timing as well. Is that they're more likely to open up when they're a year away, 6 months away, I guess, from changing.
Yes, but but yes, that's in part. But the other way in which they'll open up is you ask them the right questions.
Yes, exactly. So the art of asking the right question. Yeah,
absolutely, and that's key. With all of these things, and it's whilst people, it's personal. It always will come down as there will be, obviously there will be absolute business objectives, but it always comes down to kind of the individual and what is important to them as that individual. And it's important that they, as trusted advisors, they need to know that they fully understand the key business objectives, but also what that individual's objectives are.
Exactly. So let's move on to the next question, which is the business development model. So can you just kind of describe your business development model? And what I mean by that is, i.e., there's outbound calls, there's email nurturing, there's events you can run, there's thought leadership you can write, there's LinkedIn posts. What's the kind of blend that you find works best in your environment?
You need to do, to a certain extent, all of them, because different things will resonate with different people.
Yes.
But I think the more often they see your name and see your brand, the more likely they are to either kind of respond to an email or answer the phone or give someone that permission. So we've got a team of 8 salespeople who do different functions. And with salespeople, you've got to let them kind of naturally fall into what they kind of feel most comfortable with, because it's whatever they feel most comfortable with, and where they've shown a particular a particular kind of aptitude for is where you've got to nurture them. So we've got some people in the team who are just kind of sledgehammers. They'll just, make 100 calls a day, and they're to a certain extent a blunt instrument, and that works for them. Right. There's other people that are much more considered, and they write really good emails and good methodical follow-up. So they're a hybrid of emails and emails and calls. You have other people that have particularly good success on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So it's a blend of all of those things, but we really spend a lot of time on calls, on kind of MailChimp, mail send outs to clients. So we do have a database, they go on our systems. But it is a combination of all of those things. And like I said, we rarely think that people when we send an email, we don't expect them to particularly respond to that. But what it does do is when we call them, they are they are much more open for a conversation. Hi, it's Rob from Leigh. Did you get my, it's, I know DeVono. Oh, you received the email? Yes, I did. And then you can kind of move on from there. I remember there was everyone's kind of, back in the day when we were really heavy on kind of Google and PPC and SEO, is the first thing that any of our kind of online advisors would say is you need to show up in both the SEO and PPC, because people are far more likely to click on you if they see you in two places than it is one. So it's almost that screen. You've got that. You're taking up space on that. You're taking space up on the screen, and I think it's similar in the real world. Whereas the more regular they see your kind of, your name, whether it's a call or a LinkedIn or a MailChimp, the more likely they are to get comfortable with your kind of brand.
Definitely, and it's. I mean, I was always taught in sales that there are between 8 and 11 touch points. So before anyone starts to have a meaningful sales conversation with you, they've likely seen you in 8 to 11 different places over a period of time.
Yeah. And we talk to the team here, and sales tends to be a dirty word, as it is in
which is very sad, I find. It's really sad.
I think more and more people are actually coming to appreciate that sales is probably one of the most valuable attributes that you can have within an organization. So we've certainly seen, with our business, that over the years, sales has been considered with far more is held in much more of a higher regard than it was before.
Yeah.
And sales, like any profession, is hard. Good salespeople are really hard to find, but they can have an immediate and massive impact on your business.
Exactly.
And there are very few roles where people can have that big effect on bottom line and the sales funnel than clearly someone who is absolutely front and central to that role.
I mean, I've never understood, over all of my business life, we're in business to grow our businesses and to employ people and create communities and add value to our customers. So with that, we typically are there to grow. Well, to grow, you have to sell. So someone's got to have the skills to sell. I mean, and then yet people say, well, sales is a dirty word. And I'm like, but it's the powerhouse of most organizations.
It's the engine. I mean, look, done really well, sales should never feel like sales.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with you that I think sales should be considered in much more of a higher regard than it does out there in general terms, and I think that will be to businesses detriment. I mean, it always depends on what it always depends on what your what your priorities are as a business, but it will be at your own expense that people don't very quickly realize that sales is a fundamental part of any business. We always talk about we're a sales business. We just happen to sell real estate advice.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of US clients, and in the US, sales isn't a dirty word.
Yeah.
Sales is a profession.
Yeah.
And people value sales.
And like I said, we sales shouldn't feel like sales certainly shouldn't feel like sales, but our whole mantra is that we want to reach as many clients as possible. We want to have as many conversations with prospective clients because we want to add value to their process. That is the light that, call it what you want. That is what it's all about. We want to be adding value to every client project. And the way in which we do that is we need to be having conversations with them to understand, what is of most valuable to them. And that just happens to be called sales.
Yeah. So the kind of final question that we thought we'd touch on is how do you hire great business development people? What are the typical attributes? What do you look for? And I don't mean someone that's fully formed. In fact, the opposite. Often someone that's relatively new into the kind of business development world and sales world, what do you think are the key attributes you're looking for?
So DeVono's been around for 20 plus years. So and our business development team has kind of taken so many guises, and you can imagine we have hired so many people over that period of time to understand how you arrive at the best, kind of how you arrive at what we perceive to be the most sustainable way to bring on salespeople. I think the first thing is that you need someone who wants a career in sales.
Yeah.
Nothing else. The moment that people say, the moment that people perceive sales to be a stepping stone to get to another role, they're not for you, because they will very quickly realize that it's much, much harder than they thought it would be. But normally, by the time that they get good, and they need to be in that seat for at least 12, 18, 24 months, and you can really start to see their kind of their progression, they want to then move into the next, they then want to move into that next that next career, or that next kind of role within the firm. So, and that doesn't pay back, with a salesperson. It typically takes, again, depending on what you do, but for us, 12, 24 months until you really get payback.
Wow.
So you want someone who wants a career in sales and wants to stay in sales for the next 20 years. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's just someone who loves the phone, that loves being on it, that loves the chase, that wants to have a career, again, sort of over the phone. We always like to bring someone in who's probably got 2 or 3 years worth of telesales experience. It could be in anything. It doesn't matter. But there'll be 2 fundamental things that we will know from that. A, they like sales and they want a career out of it. But B, they are not afraid of the phone. They know exactly what they're getting into, and they're comfortable with making calls.
Yeah.
So those are really, for us, the 2 kind of things. I mean, everything else can be coached. You want people to, I think everything else is a case of, case by case. You want them to be able to listen. You want them to be articulate. You want them to be able to ask the right questions. You want the tonality to be good, all of those kind of things. But fundamentally, we're looking at people that really show themselves to be kind of tenacious, to be thick-skinned, to be really determined, and have a real focus around a certain amount of, dial-outs a day, and an attitude about making X amount of dial-outs a day and having X amount of phone calls, and actually understanding understanding the work that goes into that and the amount of rejection that they do get.
Yeah.
I think if you have kind of all of those pillars, you have I think you have a great foundation to build that person's career. Within our business development team, we want careers there. We want people to grow. There's no kind of ceiling in which to how a person can grow and progress.
Yeah.
But really, we want those things. We want people that evidence a career in sales, and can give us kind of, can really demonstrate to us as to, and show kind of evidence as to why we should believe that this is a career that they want. I mean, the issue is, if you're good at sales, you're good at interviewing. So again, there is a real fine art in being able to kind of make informed decisions, and we have not employed a lot of people, and the response is being, I kind of understand everything you're saying, but I don't quite believe certain aspects of what you're saying because of your career history, or what you've done elsewhere, or what you've said as part of your as part of what you want from an next role. But it's like I said, we will continue to get it right, and we'll continue to get it wrong. And there is no hard and fast rule.
There's no silver bullet, that's for sure.
There is no silver bullet. And sometimes what we've kind of done before is we've hired multiples of people.
Yeah.
because there is, and sometimes it's worked out really well, and everyone's kind of made it through probation, and sometimes it hasn't quite worked out like that. But the person that we thought was going to do the best did the worst, and the person who we didn't have much hope in. But because the onboarding process is the same, it's the same amount of training, it's the same amount of investment in time to bring them up. Then that's really worked well. And having 2 or 3 or 4 people start at the same time is also really motivational.
Right. So just as we kind of close the session, because I don't want to use more of your time than we agreed, if I was in the audience listening, I'd be thinking, this all sounds great, but does it drive business outcomes? So without knowing your numbers, we don't need to know what your revenues are, etc. But just kind of illustratively, you invest in salespeople, you invest in outbound, you invest in the different touch points. Does it correlate with, and yes, the business has grown?
Yes. I mean, look, we invest in a big, business development function, which extends to calls, to marketing, to all of those kind of aspects. And we get multiples of our ROI. So without going into too much detail, without doubt, the having the business development function without question is a fantastic ROI for us. And it's a great outreach. And not everything leads to a sale, but you build your network, you build relationships, and that can have a really positive knock-on effect.
I mean, I hear people of kind of like, once you get to the kind of 2 to 3 times ROI, you've got a system that works. It's a proper system. It's not just ad hoc. And then people are growing off the back of that. But I think, some people that start, they don't invest, or they start to cut down in different areas. Ultimately, the kind of the ROI collapses.
Yeah.
You've got to be in it for the long run.
Yeah, I think that it from a stance, I mean, it depends on what your sales cycle is. If a normal sales cycle is 12, 18 months, then clearly it's not going to work. Yeah. But when anyone, the advice for anyone who's starting a journey in sales is you need to build out a plan that will sustain you for 2 or 3 years, even if you don't earn a single kind of penny, because that's what the sales cycle takes. But you just have to get serious. You have to have some type of CRM system. I mean, it can be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah. But but if done correctly, ROI should be significantly more than 2 to 3. It could be 4 to 5 or 5 to 6. Yeah. Depending on what you do. And like I said, it's a blended approach. It's not sales in isolation, but without question, outreach, cold calls is kind of an essential component of the success of our business. And it's something that has taken, as I said, we've had this team for over 20 years, and we are still forever fine tuning it and changing it and altering it. It's a living, breathing kind of organism. But however, there will always be improvements to make. It evidences great kind of ROI for us, and we will just continue to build and develop. In that direction, for all those reasons, as well as it gives us the ability to help more clients.
And if you were giving some advice to someone who was entrepreneur, founder, has got their company up to maybe 5 million of revenue, but doesn't have a sales and marketing / business development engine, and is looking to build a proper sustainable engine, where would you say is the kind of like place to look first on that journey of building a proper engine rather than ad hoc?
I think that it would probably start with. A lot of these kind of opportunities is to find the right person in sales and let them help build it out for you. Right. So I think if you have a good understanding of what you want to do, obviously you'll build it out to a certain way, but you should almost get the role to 70% of what you need it to be, and even the business plan up to 70% of what you need it to be, and then just start interviewing on that basis. Right. And it will be the right, and it will be through meeting the right person who will potentially help you evolve that business development. But if you are going to, bring on a senior person to effectively run and build and develop it, they need to be part of that journey. And yes. I think a lot of business owners kind of really struggle with trying to fine tune this business plan to an inch of its life, only to realize and procrastinate about it, only to realize that actually 70% is good enough to start recruiting for professional people who will help you complete that 30%.
Because they want to put their fingerprints on it as well.
Yeah, but also they will see what you're doing, and they will be able to cut through what they perceive to be the best route to go about, the best route to, winning that work, or the best route to building out a sustainable strategy. But a salesperson has been there, done that. They've got lots of war stories, and frankly, will guide you through the rabbit warren of considerations that you're going through a lens of experience. Look, exactly. Let's not do that because we've done that before, and actually let's spend our time here. But a lot of the time we focus is the Pareto's law, which is, as you'll know, it's you spend 80% of your time delivering 20% of the results. So we spend a lot of time about how we can flip that, but also looking at low-hanging fruit. Where have you got, with everything we call, whilst you call it cold call, there'd be a rationale. It's a sector we know, or it's a building that we know. So there will be similar things in your own business, which is like, where is the story? Where is it actually we've got something to say? And for a lot of people not in sales, that isn't immediately kind of obvious.
Right.
And again, the right type of business individual will be able to say, well, look, tell me about the business. What work have you done? Who have you worked for? What locations have you worked in? And start to build a bit of a story as to the audience in which we should be approaching, but also where you have the most relevance.
Brilliant. Robert, it's been fantastic. Really enjoyed having a conversation with you. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, they can visit our website, which is devono.com, devono.com. And if anyone has any questions or wants to reach out personally, love to hear from you.
Very good. And you're on LinkedIn?
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. Robert, thanks very much indeed. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for listening to Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast series with your host, Mike Lander. Please subscribe so that you'll catch all the next episodes.